pledge allegiance
to the flag
flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a reading of the Sunshine Law, please.
Notice that this meeting was published in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act.
Okay, and as usual, there will be no new business taken after 11 p.m. Before we do roll call, I just want to let members of the public know, you all probably know Bill Betcher, who was a longtime Township Committee and Joint Land Use Board, Fire Department, everything. He passed away a month ago, I guess it is. Yeah, it is, the 31st of May. So I just wanted to let you know, he'll be missed. Okay, may I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Gilmore,
Here.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Here.
Mrs. Kelly,
Here.
Mr. McKay,
Here.
Mr. Tricoci,
Here.
Mrs. Baggio,
Here.
Mrs. Tyndale, absent. Ms. Cosco,
Here.
Mr. Krollpfeifer,
Here?
Mr. Bradley,
Here.
Mr. Silk, absent. Mrs. Murphy, Mr. Murphy, I'm sorry,
Here.
and Mrs. Conguglio, absent.
Okay, do we have a quorum?
Yes.
Okay. We have some items for new business before we move into it. Should I do the Philadelphia delay first before the, okay, just a quickie. The case B, 2109, the Philadelphia Hardware Group, they're requesting a postponement until August 4th meeting. And that we have to have a motion and a second and roll call on it to have it postponed.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, second? I'll do it. Any questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Krollpfeifer,
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. Tricoci,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio,
Yes.
and Mr. Bradley.
Yes.
Okay, the first order of business is,
Yes.
I'm sorry. You good? R&M Development, the subdivision on 60 Bancroft Lane. Counselor Sturm, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the
evening.
board. It's been quite a while since we were here, and I'm glad that things are much improved. This is basically for the final approval of the major subdivision. And we have here Mr. Gravlin, who will do the presentation with regard to the plan. And also we have here this evening Mr. Chris Kurozakis, who is a environmental management expert, and he will testify with regard to his study that he performed on the property, the environmental study.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll go with
Good evening.
Jack, let me swear you in. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
My name is Jack Gravlin. I'm a civil engineer. I've appeared before this board many times. Do you want my qualifications, or?
I don't believe it'd be necessary.
Thank you.
Unless you want to do it so the public knows.
Well, I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. I am a member of the American Society of Civil Engineers. I'm a member of the Mullica Township Planning Board where I live, and I've been doing this for over 30 years now.
Thank you.
I only have 3 pages here. I'll be able to go through this fairly quickly. Just for the record, we are requesting a final major subdivision approval. It is Block 100, lots 8.02 and a portion of 8.03, Lot 8.03 and a portion of Lot 8.02. We are requesting 41 residential lots, 1 homeowners association lot, which is primarily the open space and also the stormwater basin, and 2 township parcels related to the access to the proposed park. A real quick summary of the last hearing. It was on 6/22/2020. At that time, the board considered the traffic issues. We had our engineer here, Dave Horner. I believe that was all resolved. We presented the environmental information related to the previous environmental impact statement and the current NJDEP mapping that indicates no threatened or endangered species or areas of special concern within the subject lot. Additional info on that will be provided by another consultant following my testimony. There was concern regarding potential basement flooding from our basin on the adjoining lots. A groundwater bounding report was prepared and submitted, and it indicated no impact to basements. I believe that was taken care of under the preliminary. The park access road and also the pedestrian access lot were discussed, and I believe an agreement was reached on both. All that is indicated on the revised final plans. I also presented detailed information regarding the volume of the stormwater basin and the associated runoff. The board asked that I revisit that to see if I could store additional volumes. I did that, and I will get into that briefly. We are now storing the entire 100-year storm event. At that time, the board granted us a preliminary subdivision approval. Now, the plans were revised as per the preliminary approval and also as per the reviews by your consultants. The key revisions to the plans. This is the final development plan. It's indicated in red. That is the perimeter of the project. It's a little vague this far out, but there are 2 lots indicated in yellow. This is the access road leading into the proposed township park. There is also a 15-foot wide lot that will be for pedestrian access from our development into the proposed park. Now, I indicate on my plan, it is a right-of-way for the township. Your planner has asked that we do it as a lot, no issue whatsoever. Rather than indicating a right-of-way, I will simply modify that to reflect it is a lot that will be dedicated to the township. There will also be a road constructed on that. We agreed to do that. That is also part of the revised plans. The next sheet was a final site plan. The revisions included sidewalks on both sides of the street where there are lot frontages, full pedestrian access with the sidewalk out to Bancroft from our development along our access road. We have pedestrian crosswalks going in at the intersection where the park access will be, as well as the additional loop street. I have indicated the location of the development sign at the corner here, and there have been numerous miscellaneous items of a technical nature requested by your consultants. All that are indicated on a revised plan. Now, the drainage plan and all these plans are identical to what was submitted. So as an exhibit, all that I'm showing are the plans that are submitted for approval, other than coloring up the one sheet that I did. This is the grading and drainage plan. Additional grades and contouring has been added to this plan to make sure there are 2% slopes all throughout the site, so there'll be no drainage issues. When you have a senior development such as this, with real small lots, grading is absolutely critical, so you don't have any drainage issues. All that is indicated on the revised plan. I believe it was the chairman, asked me to take a look at storing additional runoff within our basin. This is the basin at the corner of the site. I did take a look at that. I was able to now size the basin for the entire storage of the 100-year storm event. So we get a 9-inch rainfall, not one drop of water will leave this site. It will all be contained within the basin and infiltrated. The utility plant was revised as a result of,
Woo! Whoa.
that's what happens when you don't block them. As a result of providing that 15-foot wide pedestrian lot, I had to shift all these lot lines, redesign the utilities, a lot of the drainage, so that there was no conflict with the new lots that were slid. So all that has also been done. This plan, the landscape plan, really required a lot of time. Our land surveyor went out there, located every single tree on the site. They are now indicated on my plan, ghosted, so they're in the background, but every single tree was located. That number was approximately 1,120 trees. On the plan in green, I indicate the tree protection areas. What we will be doing, we will be installing fencing along the perimeter of the tree protection area before we ever do any construction out there whatsoever. That will protect all the buffer trees as well as the trees behind these lots. It isn't necessary to disturb this area, so we are going to protect all those trees. We were also able to save all the existing trees at the corner of the open space lot. Now on the plan, you'll see these darker trees. They are proposed infill trees that will be placed pursuant to field visits by your planner. We will position them exactly where it is necessary to infill the existing development. We are proposing 93 additional trees as infill. Within the tree protection areas, we are preserving approximately 226 trees. An additional 79 street trees will also be placed all throughout the roadway frontages, all at a 50-foot maximum spacing. Additional plantings, foundation plantings, in conjunction with the home construction will also be placed, and we are agreeing to install 2 more trees per house for an additional 82 trees. Now, why I am so specific on the number is that your ordinance requires a 1-to-1 replacement. Every tree that we take down, we have to replant. Physically, it's an impossibility. It just cannot be accomplished. But we are going to request a waiver from the board, that is from section 104-114, to allow the replacement of trees at less than a 1-to-1 ratio. The number of trees to be waived is calculated as follows. Actually, very simple. 1,120 existing trees all throughout the site, less the 226 trees we are saving within the tree protection areas, less 93 trees we are proposing as infill for the buffers, and less 82 trees for the 2 trees per lot that will be installed in conjunction with the home construction. That equals 719. So we are requesting a waiver on that. We're also requesting, as part of that waiver, to allow the replacement trees to be at a size less than the 3-inch caliber. I indicate the sizes on the plans. They are substantial trees. They are not 3-inch caliber. I respectfully submit that we have provided buffer tree protection, buffer infill plantings, and additional plantings to the extent possible on the site. Every available inch that is not being cleared and used for the roadway and home construction or the basin has been planted. Now the 2 trees per homeowner's lot will be placed after we figure where the new home is going, what the exact dimensions are, and we'll be able to place them at that point. All the remaining plans, the erosion, the profile, both detail sheets were also revised as per the review comments. As far as the review letters are concerned, the planner's letter dated 3/31/2021, it's about a dozen minor revisions. We will comply. He had asked that I indicate that tree calculation, which I just did. The engineer's letter was dated 4/2/2021. Again, there are about a dozen minor revisions. We will comply. With the exception of one comment in his letter, number 11, he indicates I have to contact the county to make sure that the names of the street comply. I called the 911 operations center, I called the planning board, I called the county engineer's office. No one knows anything about that. So if he can direct me to right route, I'll certainly do that. But as far as I know, I did a Google search. I don't believe there's an overlap on the street names, but if he can tell me how to do it, I will confirm it. That is it for my presentation. Again, I believe that the plans basically conform to the Hainesport Township and the RSIS requirements, and it will result in a project that is an asset to the community. I would ask the board to consider granting the final subdivision approval and allow the project to proceed.
Thank you.
Oh, one more thing, the chairman. There's an easement. There's an easement at the back of the property, right here. It's an existing easement. Let me tell you a little history on this. Myself and Gus Diamantis, the owner of the ground, met with Steve Schilling, the owner of Quaker, and also David Brandt in the late 1990s, before Creekview was built, or as it was just beginning construction. Part of our agreement with Schilling was that he provide us an easement between these 2 future lots. It is a 30-foot wide easement. I had reviewed the existing topography of the site before the meeting, I could see that ultimately, in the long run, here we are 25 years later, when this parcel was developed, we would need to have an easement for our utilities to get out to Wharton and the existing storm sewer and also the existing sanitary sewer. The existing sanitary sewer pipe was actually installed. It is out there, ready to connect to with a manhole at the edge of our property. It is indicated on the final plan of lots. This is a plan that was recorded at the county. It is a permanent easement. It will never go away unless we consent to it, I guess, which obviously we're not going to. And it is available for our use. It is not a temporary easement. It is a permanent easement established on the record file map at the county courthouse. That is the extent of my presentation.
You'll have to dig that up to put your stormwater pipes in?
Yes, we will be digging that up to install the stormwater pipes. I indicate on my plan, any landscaping, there are some railroad ties, whatever is out there, and I've got them all detailed on my plan. Whatever is out there and disturbed will be restored in kind. It will be back to how it is originally.
Will that construction require cutting open the street and curb on Wharton Place?
Yes,
And that will be repatched to township specifications?
it will absolutely be patched to township specifications. We also need to connect the water and sewer in Bancroft. I was very disturbed to see you're out there paving the road right before we are about to do this, but regardless, we will have to tear that up. We will agree to repair it as good as it currently is. That will include, we'll go from curb to curb. We won't just do trenches, we will repave the entire section of that roadway where we disturb it. And there will be two seams, but we'll make sure that the seams line up perfectly. We can heat treat the seams, even if required by your engineer.
Okay, before we open it up to any questions, can we get some answers from our professionals? You had directed a question to Mr. Miller regarding an address or getting in touch with someone.
Yes.
Can you help us with that?
Your comment number,
11.
To do with the street name?
11.
yes.
I'm convinced that you did what you have to do, so I don't have a problem.
Okay.
Okay, so that's done.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor, the planting and everything else, is that acceptable? You've gone over a lot of it and comfortable with it?
We have, and I think maybe just for clarification, we went through some of the numbers, I think, and I think some of the numbers may have gotten mixed up. So the way our ordinance at 104-114 requires the reforestation that Mr. Gravelin discussed was for every tree 8 inches or greater in size that has to be removed, one replacement tree at 3-inch needs to be. So the calculation would be the total number of trees, which I think in our conversation today you said was 800 and some.
No, 1120 is the existing tree number.
No, I'm saying the number,
Oh.
number that's being removed.
Okay, it would be the 1120 less the 226.
Less 93,
Yes.
less 82.
A little below 800.
So-
794.
Right, so approximately all right, so 794 are being removed. That's technically the requirement under the ordinance. And you're proposing 175 replacement trees. That's 93 infill plus 82 foundation trees.
That is, no, yes, that is correct.
So that would be the relief. The approximately 800 or 795 trees were required by 114. and they're proposing to plant 75, and I believe the size on the plans was 2.5-inch caliper versus 3-inch caliper. I don't have a concern about the size at all. There was some discussion during the preliminary hearing about providing some additional tree planting around the perimeter of the basin, where some of that transitional grading needs to happen. So that may be an item that at some point in the evening the board wants to entertain. One of the other things that has been done, and we've done on some other projects successfully, is along some of those perimeters to put some additional trees in, to use seedlings and tubelings that can cost anywhere from 50 cents to $1 each, to try to get some of those edges reforested. So that might be a less expensive alternative too, if any additional trees are necessary. But other than that, you'll comply and provide the rest of the testimony based on the comments in our report?
Yes.
I have a question. Is the infill with the seedlings and the tubulings that you talked about, is that at one of these, you'll know it when you see it situations after the grading is done and other trees are added and trees removed?
It can be.
Could this be a condition of approval to have that as a site meeting subject to your sound discretion once we get to that point?
Yeah, and at the board's discretion, it could be handled that way. I do have actually one follow-up, Mr. Gravelin. I just noticed, we had a comment in our report that you hadn't shown a development site identification sign. And I just actually noticed that there is one, and I think the reason I didn't catch it is it's shown on the adjacent commercial remainder property.
It is.
So, and there wasn't a detail on the plan. So the first thing I would say is if it's going to go on that adjacent commercial property, there needs to be an easement to the benefit of the HOA so that they can landscape and maintain that in perpetuity without issue with whoever the commercial owner may be.
That is correct. It is actually indicated on the adjoining commercial lot owned by Mr. Diamantis. It was placed there primarily for visibility. We being the senior development, have no frontage other than for the right-of-way itself along Bancroft. You will agree to give that easement for the sidewalks, right? Mr. Diamantis is indicating he will grant that easement.
And the size and design will comply with the township ordinance standards?
It'll be one of these, I indicate the size, I believe it was 4 by 8, and we did follow the township ordinance, and we will make sure that it does comply. One of these will be chosen. They haven't actually chosen the sign yet, but I believe they all conform. They're just low monument-type signs, only intended for development identification, not really advertising, and it'll be of that nature, and it will comply to the township requirements.
Will there be any lighting on that or not?
We were proposing electric out there, and it will be a lighting that actually shines up onto the sign itself from the ground.
Okay.
You know, it isn't big glaring lights. They'll be located underneath the sign, shining up, only to illuminate the fascia of the sign.
And it'll be not a blinking light, steady light? Steady
Yes,
light.
it'll be a completely
Okay.
steady LED light, I'm sure
Okay.
at this point. Everything is LED. So it will not be obtuse or anything like that. It's,
All right.
And those, you'll provide details of those lights on the plan?
yes, I'll have to get together with them and we can design something.
And the only reason we say that is because that sign is kind of close to the road. The two things we want to make sure is that the light that is used, that it's more of a spotlight with a shield around it, so we don't get glare on the roadway. And then secondarily, a lot of times what we do is try to move them to the front edge of the sign so they point back, and that actually can reduce the amount of glare for a motorist, so there isn't an issue with confusing those as oncoming vehicle.
Okay.
So as part of an approval with regards to the sign itself, the location, and the lighting is all subject to Mr. Taylor's concurrence. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, there is a need for me to submit final conformance plans before signature and a
Right.
sign off.
Understand.
That will be one of the items. They will be subject to review by Mr. Taylor and also Mr. Miller, just to dot the i's and cross all the t's of all the details.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to clarify, which you brought up, has to do with the easement, and I noticed you were looking at Mr. Kingsbury at that point. Did you want me to comment on the easement or concurrence with what he said, or is?
Gave, in the board's package, I had a memo about the easement. There was some reference a year ago that the easement had expired. I looked into that, and that's a different easement. It didn't have anything to do with the sewer easement. So my opinion is that Mr. Gravelin is correct, that sewer easement that he has has not expired.
Okay.
It's still there.
Kudos to Mr. Graveling for having 25-year foresight.
Well, that's why Gus pays me the big bucks, I guess. But I did look at that back then, and it was part of an exchange of lands so that Bancroft would be able to get out, and and I took a look at that, and I could see we would need that, because otherwise, I don't know how you could develop this project without that easement. Land planning sometimes works,
Thank you.
Sometimes?
sometimes.
Okay,
I think you said that was the end of your presentation. Does
That is
anybody on the
extent.
board have a question of,
I guess, yeah, a couple of detailed questions. Mr. Gravel, the slopes on the base, are you proposing, and I'm not suggesting it's necessary or not, any fencing around the basin given the slopes, or is?
Oh, we are installing a fence all the way around the perimeter of it. I had indicated a pressure-treated fence. Mr. Taylor has asked that in addition to being pressure-treated, that it be a 3-board fence of a substantial construction. I just agreed to conform to his, and that will be indicated on the final conformance plans. A 3-board fence all the way around the entire perimeter with a gate, of course, for access.
Is that, in other words, is that a 3-rail fence?
Well,
It is. So what they were proposing in their first initial submission was just a regular split rail fence that we find that the tips of those rot if a kid stands on it or sits on it, and then it sort of negates the safety aspect. So we had suggested going to a pressure-treated fencing, sort of a post and rail fence, and we find that they will last. We have some that are 25, 30 years.
Right, and this is going to have
Age.
a wire mesh backing?
I believe,
Maybe my description of it is a little off, but
Well, I'm not so sure that we would need to do that.
the
Now that we're
ordinance.
putting in boards,
Right.
there would only be very small spaces. Normally, with a split rail fence, I have put the mesh on that. That's because anybody, including children, are able to get under it.
right.
This will be a different situation, because there'll be boards stacked 3 high, and and I believe it's a 36-inch high fence.
It is.
So you go with 3 8-inch boards, that'll be pretty much of a solid fence almost, other than for little spacings in between.
All right. Because this is a pretty deep basin, based on what I can see.
It is well, it's a deep basin, but it will be a dry basin. I have a history with the Pep Boys and also the restaurant. As the water comes in, it goes into the ground. Literally, it is a tinting sand out there. That's the reason they were mining these properties out there for all those years for the sand. It is about the purest sand you could buy, and it has an incredible infiltration rate.
Okay. I guess the last question really I have directed to our planner. The street trees that they're going to put in, are going to avoid evasive trees that break up sidewalks and trees like the Hainesport Chase hybrids that die after 20 years.
I think they were, they made pears and cherries.
There were Bradford pears and
Yeah.
some other trees. They're the
Yeah,
worst.
And we do focus on everything. We try to maximize native plants whenever possible, and then try to use other naturalized species, taproot whenever possible, to minimize or limit the risk of curb and sidewalk heaving. That being said, so one thing works to our advantage. Those well-drained sands mean that the roots are more likely to grow down to find water. When you have a high water table, a lot of times you see surface roots. They're more apt to push sidewalks up. The other thing is, if these trees live long enough, there may be some impacts to sidewalks. And there's no great downtown in New Jersey, whether it's Princeton or Haddonfield or anywhere, when the trees get huge, there can be some impacts. The roads will also have to be repaved at some point in the future too. So we try to do the best that we can, but there may be points decades down the road where some maintenance does have to occur as part of the
Right.
town's infrastructure.
Understood, but you don't want maples in 10 years breaking up the sidewalk.
Understood. Yep.
Any other comments, questions from board members for Mr. Graveline? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Sturm, your next witness, please.
Mr. Stern, could you, you may not have had a witness on this, but maybe Mr. Diamantis or one of his associates.
Would you like
Give me-
Mr. Diamantis?
Well, let me ask my question, then you give me the answer. Can you give me just a 2-minute description of the type of housing that's going in here? Because this happened so long ago that I don't have a clear picture in my mind. Obviously, I know it's senior housing, and I know it's single-family housing, but maybe just a picture, just square footage, design, 1 or 2 garages.
Yes, I'd like to call,
Mr. Bartholomew?
Wait, you want to have him sworn in, please?
You swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Just a refresher course for the record on what these houses are going to look like.
So we're looking at about 3 model homes. We're going to be 3 different types of homes. One will be a rancher, one will be a Cape Cod with a loft upstairs, and one will be basically a 2-floor house, 1,900 square feet, 1,980 to 1,450 square feet in between, depending if you're going to have a finished upstairs and a finished basement. So basic houses, nothing
Basics, basements are available.
optional.
You want to order one? 1-car garage, 2-car garage?
2-car garage.
Okay. All right, that's good enough. Thank you. No,
These are just basic drawings of them.
just architects'
Yeah.
sketches, okay.
We had submitted these as part of our application back in 2019, I believe it was.
Yes.
I think I remember something, but it's been so long ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh,
Love the idea of a rancher. Love the idea of a rancher.
Members of the board, prior to the one of the scheduled meetings that we had for this, for final subdivision approval, there was a neighbor had submitted to the board and to Paula, basically information to the effect that there may be endangered species on the property. And I believe that Mr. Gravelin previously submitted information and testified that the prior environmental study that was performed, I believe, was in 2003, and he had also researched the maps and information that was available. However, in order, and this was not a condition that the board imposed or suggested, but we certainly thought it would be appropriate to engage an environmental expert to make a study and sort of responsive to what had been submitted by one of the neighbors. So we had engaged Chris Kurzakis, who's this gentleman here, and he's an expert in environmental management, and he has not appeared before this board before, so if I may present him and ask some questions with regard to his qualifications.
Proceed.
All right. I think the first thing they would ask is that...
Sir, do you swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
I think you'll need to spell your name.
Sure. The name is Chris Koutizakis. The last name is Koutouzakis. I'll get into my qualifications. I have a BA in biology from Emory University, and I have a master's in environmental management from the Nicholas School of the Environment, Duke University. I'm also a professional wetland scientist as administered by the Society of Wetland Scientists. I've been in the environmental field. I'm currently a senior environmental scientist with Ecol Sciences. The company is out of Rockaway, New Jersey. We do most all of our work throughout the state of New Jersey. I've been in the environmental field doing work such as environmental impact statements, wetland delineations and permitting, threatened and endangered species assessments, studies, and monitoring projects for threatened and endangered species now for about 24 years.
All right, could you tell us whether you've appeared at other boards, in what capacity, and...
I've appeared as an expert witness on a few occasions in the township of Hillsborough. These are for environmental impact statements that were prepared for development projects, and also in front of the township of Wyckoff, again for a development project, as well as Bordentown, New Jersey, for a development project.
And you testified as an expert, and you were accepted as an expert by those boards?
Yes, sir.
I would submit Mr. Kurzakis as an expert in that area.
Any board members have any questions or objections? If not, move forward. He's accepted.
All right, would you please make a presentation?
Absolutely.
Exactly what you did.
All right, sir, I have a question for you before you get started.
Yes, ma'am.
Number one, your name is Chris Christopoulos. Hopefully I pronounced it close. When did you write this report?
I just wrote this report. I finished it up on June 29th.
And why was it that late?
Why was it that late?
Yes.
I was retained by my client within a week or 2 weeks before that date.
Because in the March 31st letter from Scott Taylor, it was referenced that we were supposed to get the old environmental impact statement, and he had the chance to respond to that. Did you get that before?
So if I can, the environmental impact statement itself from the prior approval was distributed by Paula, so that was an item that we did receive.
And when was that distributed? Last week,
With,
correct, Paul?
No.
No, that was distributed with the last application.
This, yes.
Yeah.
So
It was back
Um, this separate report that Mr. Kudazakis, I get it? Kudazakis is referencing was, there had been a package of information submitted by a resident that our office forwarded to the applicant in advance of their prior scheduled hearing. And we just noted that they should be prepared to address this for the board. It was raised a little bit as an issue at the preliminary approval. The board deferred that to the time of final approval to address the environmental issues. And so the applicant wasn't blindsided the night of the hearing with a packet. We sent it and said, you may want to be prepared. And I think they took it upon themselves to then hire an expert to address those issues. And then this second report of June 29th was submitted, in addition to the prior EIS.
All right, I am the chairman of the Haynesburg Township Environmental Commission. Every single month since March, I have asked if the township be gotten a letter. And our last meeting was a week ago today. To me, June 29th, it's pretty, we're volunteers. I didn't have time with everything else that was going on, including a death, to go through this and to really assess it. I think this, I don't feel qualified to deal with this tonight. And I'm talking to him.
I'm sorry.
So I know you were just retained. I'm not saying it's you. My next question is, did you go to the site?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you walk the site?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you observe anything that was mentioned in these letters on the site?
No, ma'am.
What, because in here, I think it's, I glanced at it. I think it was, at one point, there was the DEP or wildlife, I'm not sure which, evidently sent somebody out too.
I'm not sure if they sent somebody out, but they looked at the sightings reports that were submitted.
So the data, what data did you use when you wrote this report?
I'm sorry?
What data? What, you
I
know?
used data from the NJDEP's landscape project version 3.3, the Natural Heritage Database, that's NJDEP, as well as conferring with NJDEP, Division of Fish and Wildlife, Endangered and Non-Game Species Program personnel regarding their processes of processing sighting reports. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a mapping program, the Information Planning and Consultation website. That's the data that I used to prepare this report, along with my experience in preparing environmental impact statements, and again, working with either state or federal agencies if need be, along those lines.
Did you have an opportunity to see the letter from the resident?
I did.
Did you take an opportunity to contact that resident?
No, I did not.
What were the dates of these mapping things that you were using?
The dates, the landscape project mapping, the latest version 3.3 is 2017. And IPAC, I'm not sure what version, it's more of an online, so I'm not sure if there's a definitive version date for the federal T&E species database that's available. But the New Jersey database, typically the landscape project and the natural heritage database, which is a database of threatened and endangered species in New Jersey, they mirror each other. The state takes sighting reports that are submitted and vets them and either accepts or rejects them. And then eventually those sightings can get put into the databases and the landscape project. So I mean, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself now in terms of, what I was going to present. But I essentially, based on the timing of these reports and working with the DEP, I needed to find out if they looked at these sighting reports, so to find out what the situation was with them.
All right, I will reinstate that I am not very happy with the idea that we got this report basically the night before online. With my eyes, I have to limit screen time. I came to the township today to get a hard copy. I also was dealing with the deaf. Therefore, I do not feel that I had the opportunity to go through this as a chairman of the Environmental Commission and as a person and a member of this board. I do not, if you had come before, not you personally, but if this was part of a presentation for this development, planners, which I guess they had the 2003, but they had, did you get this one? Did you get this? When did you get this one?
Did, I believe, June 29th or June 30th.
I thought they had to have 30 days to go through things if they chose. So my question, not to you,
Excuse me, could I maybe clarify something? Never can pronounce your name,
Who does that?
the gentleman behind you.
I'm sorry.
He's another Chris.
Yes.
To help everybody understand, you and I had a conversation about this issue, and this Chris was going to, you were of the opinion that this meeting was next week, the first Wednesday of July. And it was about 4 days ago that you found out that it was tonight. And the environmental Chris, sorry, I can't pronounce the last name, but was not going to be available next week, and that was the reason for the rush request on this report.
Correct.
Okay? Otherwise, you were not going to be able to testify on the next August, in July. It would have to be moved to August, and we wanted to move this thing forward. Is that?
Correct.
Is that, I had the same questions relative to why this information came in so late, and I hope that, I'm not trying to testify, I'm just trying to get you to agree to tell them what happened. Am I right with that?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely right.
but the bottom line is, there was a note in the March from Scott Taylor. This was part of preliminary. So, to me, the timeline still is up. Well, I'll listen to you, but you're not, okay.
Well, this was not a condition of the board. This was something that we decided we should do and did. Now, the problem is this with COVID. Mr. Graveline was involved with, 3 other environmental companies in trying to engage them going back, 2 months, 3 months. And there was a problem with basically them accepting the work for various reasons, basically because of the COVID situation and the time period they said they would need. Some of them indicated would be 2 months, 60 days before they could do it. So it wasn't a situation that was neglected. I mean, from the day that we were scheduled to appear before this board on the May date, and the comments by the neighbor came in, 2 days before, 3 days before the meeting. We postponed that meeting. We requested an adjournment in order to be able to address that issue. So we've done as well as we have, and as far as we were fortunate to get Mr. Kurosakis because of his timetable and his ability to do it. I mean, in order to make this meeting. And I apologize for the lateness, but as I indicated, this is a volunteered effort here to assist the board with regard to, because of the fact that, because of that letter that was written and the information submitted. So, and I apologize. I mean, I realize this is not something that usually happens, but we had to work around what we had to work around. And we didn't really want to postpone this for another month, because I think Mr. Graveling can testify different people he contacted, Marathon Engineering, and all these people, and they said they.
I accept that.
Okay.
Now, but the bottom line is, it still goes back to you. Can I call you Mr. Chris?
Chris K, that works.
So you said that you had not contacted the homeowner,
No,
and yet part of her report is in your report.
yes. Well, her letter that she submitted is
Right.
in the attachments, yes. I mean, that's the primary reason, that's the focus
Okay.
of my assessment.
And her original date, I believe, was July the 2nd. So,
Last year.
well,
July the 2nd, that's when it got submitted to the township. The sighting reports are from, I think, January 1st or 2nd, 2020.
Correct. All right. I will let you continue for now.
All right. I will continue, and I think you'll see that when I'm done, maybe you'll have some more questions, but let me just go ahead. We've already covered some of the information. I'm gonna start with essentially how, generally speaking, to address the letter that was submitted to the township. If I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's a Mrs. Sawoff. If I didn't get that right, my apologies if you're here. So you all have seen the letter. She submitted the letter, and in the letter, she states, based on looking at databases such as the Fish and Wildlife Service database, she makes a statement that there are threatened and endangered species on the site. Firstly, I'd like to state that for the federal database and even the state databases, when you put an inquiry in for the property, that does not mean that the species is located on the site. It means the species may be in the vicinity and there might be an impact. So there might be grounds for project review by whatever organization has jurisdiction over those species, whether they're federally listed or state listed. So just to break down again, I started my assessment with looking at the existing New Jersey NJDEP mapping for threatened endangered species for the site. The existing mapping, again, it's in the report. I don't have figures to put up in front of you, but the existing mapping doesn't have any habitat for threatened endangered species mapped on the parcel at all. The closest mapped habitat has to do with bald eagle and great blue heron, which is associated with Rancocas Creek, which is off-site. Federal databases, if you go in and you put the project in for the federal database, that's again the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Information and Planning for Consultation. It's a website. That comes back with 4 potential species that may be present in the site area. Those 4 species are the northern long-eared bat, the bog turtle, 2 animal species, and then there's 2 plant species, swamp pink and sensitive joint vetch. Excuse me. So again, by taking a first look at that report, that gives you a base to go by, meaning the federal government has some records, maybe in the vicinity, and they would be looking to see if a project, potentially if a project might impact these species. When looking at a project and making an analysis, there are times when you can make a no-effect determination for a species based on certain factors of the project, location, habitat, and such. One example being the northern long-eared bat. New Jersey has a list of municipalities that have maternity or hibernation occurrences of Indiana bat and northern long-eared bat. Okay, on that list, they're going to list per county each of the townships that they know of that have any of these any of these sightings. Hainesport is not on that list. Typically, a township is going to be on that list, and then it could be even emphasized on that list if they know that there are hibernacular locations or maternity colony locations. Neither of that is the case for Hainesport, meaning from the consideration, excuse me, of the federal government, they're not going to be interested in a consultation on this based on the fact that we're not on that, Hainesport is not on that list. Meaning you can make a determination that there's a no effect on on a species like northern long-eared bat, based on existing information. The other 3 species on the federal list for the project, okay, that's again, we're talking bog turtle and the 2 plants, swamp pink and sensitive joint vetch. All 3 of those species are wetland species, critically dependent on wetlands and waters for survival, okay? Other state databases have no wetlands mapped on the site. And my site walk I didn't see anything during my site walk that indicated there was any wetlands on the site. Therefore, you can make the deduction there's going to be no impacts to these species that are dependent on these wetlands, because there are no wetlands on site for these species to be in. Swamp pink is usually going to be along slow-moving streams and their surrounding wetlands. We don't have any of that on the site. I'm a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service qualified bog turtle surveyor, which I have to go through a lot to get myself on that list. Again, not only do I know how to delineate wetlands, but I know how to identify wetlands that are suitable for bog turtles. There's no wetlands on the site. If there were wetlands on the site, I could tell you whether bog turtle might want to be there or not. Should not be an issue. There's no wetlands on the site. Swamp pink and the sensitive joint vetch as well is critically dependent on wetlands. It's an obligate species, meaning it grows in wetlands 99% of the time. So from a federal standpoint, there should be no impact on any of those species. That is essentially one of the conclusions that I come to in my assessment. So before coming to any conclusions regarding any additional species, barred owl and red-headed woodpecker were not listed on any databases for being on the site. These sighting reports were submitted to the state and were submitted to the township at one point. So I needed to figure out what the status was with these sighting reports. The sighting reports go to the state biologists look at each instance, and they make a determination based on their criteria of whether they're going to accept or reject the sightings. I spoke with biologists down there, and frankly, they told me that for the last year and a half, they have not done much at all in terms of assessing, based on the pandemic, based on assessing these sighting reports. But what they were nice enough to do for me was to unearth these 2 sighting reports from underneath a pile somewhere and have their people look at them. So you will see that in one of the attachments to the correspondence of the report, because, long story short, the NJDEP biologists wanted to, are accepting the barred owl sighting, but rejecting the red-headed woodpecker sighting. So currently there are no databases. The landscape project or the natural heritage database do not show this, because this is all new information. So even though I looked at those databases, that's a place to start. So at this point, we're proceeding with the assumption that there is the possibility of having barred owl out on this site. So essentially, with the possibility of having a barred owl on the site, you know, the New Jersey law to protect threatened and endangered species is set up to not have take to these species, meaning not to harass, kill, hunt, etc. I can look at the exact language, if you don't mind. Take is defined by the law as harassing, hunting, capturing, or killing, or attempting to do so. So, I mean, the long and the short of it is that my client is going to proceed based on the assumption that barred owl might be present on the site. But the way to prevent a take of a bird species that may be nesting on the site is to not damage any potential areas where they might be nesting. So the Fish and Wildlife Service recommends a window of, they recommend April 1st through August 31st to protect migratory nesting birds. But to go a little further into it, because there is some literature that has barred owls nesting and laying eggs in New Jersey and maybe the New York area into March, essentially the report makes the recommendation, again, the assumption that barred owl may be present, but makes the recommendation that the client have a window, a restricted cutting window of essentially not removing trees from the site from March 1st through August 31st, thus not disturbing or any take to any barred owls that might potentially be present or nesting on the property. So with all of that being said, again, just to kind of summarize, currently the New Jersey state databases don't have anything mapped on site. However, New Jersey has accepted the sighting report for barred owl and rejected the sighting report for red-headed woodpecker. Federal databases had the 4 species that I mentioned earlier, and I've addressed why we feel there's going to be no impact to those species. And then essentially, based on the assumption that barred owl may be present on site, the recommended restricted cutting window is what is recommended in that circumstance.
Mr. Kurosakis, you, if I'm getting ahead of your speech, stop me, but you included in Exhibit B to your report the email from Gretchen Fowles.
Yes.
Of New Jersey Fish and Wildlife. Is she the one that advised you that the state rejected the woodpecker sighting?
Yes.
Did she give reasons for that? I did not see a statement of reasons in the package.
They look at a number of things, and I honestly, I'm not sure what made them accept or reject. The one thing I do know is that the closest red-headed woodpecker habitat mapped is farther away than the closest barred owl habitat. I believe the closest mapped barred owl habitat is a little less than a mile, whereas red-headed woodpecker is somewhere closer to 2 or 3 miles from the site. But honestly, I don't want to speak for the state in terms of their vetting processes, because it's not really, I think, my place to do. I know they look at many different factors, but that's not what I do.
Hypothetically, if they had accepted the woodpecker as well, would the mitigation
Yes.
efforts for the woodpecker be the same or
Yes.
similar to the barred
Again,
owl?
if red-headed woodpecker is nesting on the site, the cutting restriction would protect any red-headed woodpeckers that are nesting on the site.
But that only goes to September 10th, as against August 31st for the owl, according to your package. The owl is April to August 31st.
The owl, we added the month of March.
Okay, no,
the
I'm
owl.
saying, but it ends August 31st, right?
Yes.
Okay.
March
I mean,
through
March
August.
is way back. We don't have to worry about March. But with regards to the red-headed woodpecker, the breeding period is May 10th through September 10th, according to the package I'm looking at, which was yours.
Which, I'm sorry.
Could you step forward and just take a
Sure.
look at this? I'll show you. It's right here.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, well, all I'm suggesting is if the applicant agrees not to disturb the wooded area till September 10th, we've covered the owl and maybe the woodpecker.
You know, again, it would cover it if yeah, for those extra couple weeks, sure.
Okay. Anything else or any other questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, if Ms. Sohoff is present,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Mrs. Kelly.
if Ms. Sohoff is present, I think she should have an opportunity to question this gentleman.
Okay, is she? Okay. To expedite this thing, I think we should do it now, rather than, you're not making public comment, we're being asked you to clarify what this gentleman's talking about, okay? Would you mind coming forward to the podium?
I have to swear you in. I swear or affirm the testimony you give will be truth, whole truth, nothing but true stuff you have.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
So I'm Sandy
For the
Saul.
record, could you give your name, please?
Sandra Soaf, S-A-O-U-A-F.
S.A.
O-U-A-F.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Sure. So just as background, I'm born and raised in Hainesport, attended K-8 Hainesport Township School and RV. I've lived in Hainesport over half of my life, and I currently reside on Bancroft Lane. I did provide the information that you have in your packet, July 2nd, 2020, to the Joint Land Use Board via the Secretary, and then on July 5 to Mr. Taylor, the planner.
Okay, could I just stop you for 1 second?
Yeah.
If everybody looks at this letter, you folks will have this letter, if you go about 5 or 6 pages back, you'll find a copy of Mrs. Soof's letter.
So this was to alert the board, after having come to all the meetings that Diamantis was at, about federally protected and threatened species, that when one looks at that specific parcel of block 100, lot 8.03, which is not wetlands, but is upland. And when you do that on the federal database, it pops up, quote, known or expected to be on or near the project area, the following species. These are 3 federally protected species. For mammals, it's the northern long-eared bat. For reptiles, it's the bog turtle, which happens to be endangered in New Jersey, as well as on the federal protected threatened list. The flowering plant of the swamp pink. One New Jersey threatened species, that was the federal. I did talk with the New Jersey DEP in December of 2019, so soon after R&M development came to the Joint Land Use Board. And at that time, I spoke with a member of the New Jersey DEP who said, you know, our databases have not been updated for quite some time, and I believe Mr. Chris said it had been 2017. Originally, I was told that it was like 2001, but apparently it has been updated to some degree. The barred owl, I have heard it continuously ever since I've lived on Bancroft Lane, which has been the past 4 years. And it's very distinctive. It has this sound, it makes a noise in the middle of the night. It sounds like they describe it as, who cooks for you, who cooks for you. It's very distinctive. I've put this sighting report into NJDEP, and lo and behold, they did tell me that they were going to send someone out there. His name was Maurice. And then I see that in the R&M development report from Mr. Chris Kouzakis, that there's a letter in Exhibit B that states that New Jersey DEP species expert accepted the sighting records for the barred owl as being present on the proposed development site, which is plot 100, lot 8.03 and 8.02. So that's been confirmed. Additionally, that same Exhibit B that Echo Sciences provided for R&N development shows that the New Jersey endangered species bog turtle and threatened species of bog turtle, long-eared bat, swamp pink, and an additional plant called the sensitive joint vetch as threatened U.S. species are, quote, known or expected to be on or near the project area. The project area being block 100, lot 8.02, 8.03. So the sighting records for the threatened bar owl and the known or expected presence of the bog turtle, the northern long-eared bat, swamp pink remain as a valid concern. So I ask that you please don't provide approval for the development without seriously addressing the issues posed by threatened and endangered species. And as Mr. Kouzakis just said, you know, there were some windows that you had to watch out for. And he mentioned that the windows that you have to look out for being for migratory birds. Well, for instance, the barred owl is not a migratory bird, so their window of sensitivity may actually be different. Um, I-
I thought
I
he's-
wonder- yeah.
Excuse me, I thought he was talking about breeding period. Am I correct? In your, he wasn't talking about migratory, he was talking about breeding.
Correct.
And they recommended April to August 31st, and you backed it up, 1 month, March through August 31st.
But is that for migratory species? Because the barred owl is not a migratory species.
True, but if it's not breeding on the site, there is no take.
But how do we know? I mean, its presence there has been confirmed by NJDEP. They agreed that it,
No, excuse me, let me just, I'm trying to cut to the chase on a lot of this stuff. You're raising some valid points, but through their representatives, the applicant has agreed to not disturb the trees because of the possible problem or the take, as you say, during that breeding period. So we don't have an issue with that. And just to jump ahead, we clarified the red-headed woodpecker, that is an extra 10 days. So they've agreed not to knock down trees to possibly disturb the breeding and have it qualify as a take. Is that right? Till after September 10th. Now, you could raise another question, that the red-headed woodpecker doesn't have a calendar. They don't know the difference between September 10th and September 11th or 9th, so, but we're trying to go with the professionals' representations.
so, I mean, I understand that there's township interest in having access to via Bancroft Lane to this proposed potential park along the creek. And I wonder if the Joint Land Use Board has considered purchasing, maybe even via a grant, the small strip of land to provide this access that you desire off of Bancroft Lane, and leaving the remaining park, which is environmentally sensitive, on these 11-plus acres, as wooded habitat for the threatened barred owl, the federally protected New Jersey endangered bog turtle.
Okay,
northern-
excuse me. You're wandering off the reason I invited you up here.
Okay.
It wasn't to make a big presentation. You'll have a chance under public comment. I wanted you to be able to discuss things directly with
Okay.
their professional.
I see.
As a courtesy for you who took the time to write this letter.
Sure.
But I mean, just some things that,
So I guess
you
that's
you were
my-
commenting about the turtle and the plants and other things, and they don't exist here because we don't have any, what was the term you used, wetlands?
So in the vicinity that is outlined on this federal database, you outlined the proper block and lot 8 point, let's see, block 100 lot 8.03 and 8.02, as did I, okay? That is upland territory. Yet that federal database still identified the same species for you and for me as being, quote, known or expected to be on or near the project area. So that indicates to me that this is known. When you draw this line around this lot that's proposed to be developed, it is, it's upland. They know it to be upland, yet they still identify these as species of concern. They're threatened and federally protected. So they could be there. I'm saying that more in-depth analysis needs to potentially be performed before you okay a development with these threatened and endangered species present.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
May I just address one more comment again? Just to repeat, there's an algorithm that goes into all these threatened and endangered species databases. So if you put the wetlands, in next to the site, typically you're going to get those same species that are going to come up. If you put it in an upland area across the street, it's more of a radius that they put based on known sightings in the federal database. They put a radius on it, and any areas that you put in are going to come up as a quote-unquote a hit. And the language they use, unfortunately, says known to occur, but if you go and talk with anyone, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, if required, if you get past a certain point, like if there are wetlands on site, maybe they would be interested in a consultation, at least something. Me going on site and saying that these don't look good for bog turtle, okay? We don't have any of that for those species. And the bat is an issue of itself. We're nowhere near these species. State databases, usually in the state, are a little better in terms of their location for known mapping of locations. And mind you, again, none of these species were mapped in the state databases anywhere nearby the site, which we know, though, the state databases eventually are going to change with these new sightings, the new sighting of the barred owl, but I'm not sure how long it will be before the state gets that into one of their, into the next version of the landscape project or into their natural heritage database. But we found out the sighting was accepted, so that's what we're proceeding along those lines. My client is proceeding assuming that barred owl are present. And I think I showed that there shouldn't be any take to these species that are potentially present on site.
Okay. The Rancocas Creek is relatively close to this property. Would that, in your opinion, professional opinion, would that qualify as a wetlands?
Sure, it's going to be a riparian corridor, but I mean, I haven't seen it, the edge of it, what it looks like in terms of, there's many different habitats even within wetlands and waters.
But the wetlands that you're talking about is freshwater, correct?
Yes, but you know what? Sometimes there's. I'll bring it up because I know. There's a little bit of. There's one population of bog turtles, I think, on Rancocas Creek, but not nearby the site. But even where it's getting a little bit tidal.
Okay.
But they're generally freshwater species.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
But I am going to make a disclaimer here.
Can you use the microphone, please?
I grew up within maybe 2,000 feet of this property. All of this ground was at one time owned by my great-grandfather, actually owned by a company that my great-grandfather worked for. Unfortunately, he died rather young. My grandparents, or his sons, took over it was put in, I don't know the legal terms, but at 21, my uncle, Harry, took over the Hainesport area. My grandfather took over the Mount Laurel area. I grew up on Route 38. In my backyard, there was incidents of the swamp pink. And I grew up on across Bankford, from Bankford, that was just clear cut. And I guess that's part of my problem, because the reputation of these developers seems to be, no matter what you say, they'll come in and clear cut. And I'm very trustworthy of Scott. He's put forth a lot of effort into his trees. But there are things that are on that land that, we were really yelled at if we touched that swamp pink. We were yelled at by the guy where the diner is. They put all the trees in 40-some years ago. If you touched those, as a child, if you went on and touched his trees, you were in trouble. Now, as a small businessman and as an ancestor to somebody that mined the sand and the gravel, it changes. And I agree with that. I have no problems with losing trees. I have problems. My biggest problem is the timing of all these reports, which is not your fault. But these were known for a long time, and they were not addressed until the last minute. I'm really glad the diner went in. We love to eat there. And that changes. So I understand that you can lose trees for a project. But what I don't understand is the way that the developer came in and disrespected us by hiring you so late. So, Mr. Taylor, when they go through and they're getting ready to cut, are you overseeing this, or who is overseeing this? So they don't go in and clear cut?
So there are notes on the plans. The ordinance requires, it's been our reports and it's reflected, excuse me, on their current plans, that they will stake the clearing limits in the field and that they will be approved by our office prior to any clearing. One of the reasons we do that is there might be a great 18-inch tree near the limit of clearing, and if we can move that fence around a few feet, it creates some benefit. And that tree protection fencing will be installed prior to any of the land clearing. Those notes are on the plan. Marty brings that up at the pre-construction meeting with the applicant. And again, the applicant has suggested that they would not do any of the clearing, excuse me, from March 1 through August 31. And then I think I saw general nodding in agreement that that could potentially be extended to September 10th, as requested by the chairman. Is
Yeah,
that accurate?
we ought to make sure that's on the record.
Is that accurate, Mr. Sturm?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Sturm, where are we going from here? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, we would ask that at this time that the board consider approving the major final subdivision, and I believe that the item, there's a waiver request, and that would be treated as part of the final approval.
Okay, and I think what you're saying is that you're asking us to consider approving it.
Yes.
Subject to Mr. Miller, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Kingsbury.
Yes, and all the stipulations that Mr. Graveline made with regard to the
Okay.
reports by Mr. Miller and Mr. Taylor.
And the September 10th to make sure we cover the
Yes.
Woodpecker.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Oh, wait, do we have anybody online? Okay, we'll get to them. I'll do that first on the public comment. Any other comments or questions from the board?
I have a comment. This has to be one of the strangest applications I've ever seen in 20 years. Every time you turn a corner, we have to do a traffic study. And at the last minute, we find wildlife on there. And, I watch Facebook a little bit, and somebody made a comment that some of the surrounding areas might have chased some of the wildlife onto this property, and now all of a sudden, this applicant's having a hard time developing his property. So, we're all witnessing the growing up, if you will, of Hainesport, and it's changing very rapidly. Paparone next door, I think he cut down every tree. I know he's putting back a lot of trees. I don't know if he had a traffic study. I wasn't on the planning board at the time for his houses. So I understand there's got to be some consternation on the part of some residents for this applicant to develop their parcel, but he's owned it for, a lot of years, and many, many, many years, and they had the foresight, as was testified, to know they were going to develop it 25 years ago and get this easement, that was contested, that was a phony easement, which we found out that's not. So, I'm with a lot of the residents that I don't necessarily like seeing the urbanization of our town, but this isn't a bad project, in my opinion. It's certainly not gonna stick out and like a sore thumb, if you will. So I just wanted to make that comment that this is just a really, maybe this is the way we're going, and with things, but this is just a very, very strange application with every time you turn a corner like this. It's like,
Well, also, if you could add to what you're saying, how many applicants come in with a development that incorporates them paying for the access to the city
well,
park?
yeah, the town, and that's another thing, I wasn't here, but, the town got together, and I think they did a great job of making arrangements with this developer to spend lots of money for access to that park. And I think this, the developer was, I think they were cooperative in doing that. Again, I wasn't around at the time, I just, getting to learn the project. And I think that's a really good thing that's gonna happen, because there is a lot of land that's not being used that we'll have access to, thanks to this applicant's willingness to cooperate with the town.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Nobody can say that the township concerns, the concerns of the people in the town relative to this development were not thoroughly examined and investigated. And then, and the opportunity to speak and object was made available. The residents, certain of them, took full advantage of that, as they are entitled to do. The applicant responded as he was entitled to do. These issues have been fully vetted and carefully studied. So no one can say this development was jammed down anybody's throat or approved without due diligence being done. Substantial due diligence was done. And now it falls to the board to make a considered judgment on that with all the evidence laid out in front of us, witnesses called, cross-examined, statements put on the record, etc. So I think this is a long time coming. We started this in what, 2019?
19, yeah, that's the case number, 19
Yeah, and here we are in 2021. But I think, we've looked under every rock at the complaints. We've determined some validity to a few, and we've found solutions to those, and not validity to others. And so we have to make a judgment based upon the science, based upon all the engineering evidence, and we'll do that tonight.
Hello? Hello? I apologize for interrupting, but nobody has offered the people in the audience who are here, or who are watching by video, the opportunity to make comments. And I just want to make sure we're not overlooked.
This is Mr. Kroll Pfeiffer, the chairman. You're not overlooked. I just mentioned you a couple of minutes ago that we're going to do public comments, and we're going to do the ones that are online first this time. So we're getting it. I think we're there now, as a matter of fact. Is that Mr. Kane? Okay.
Yeah, I just picked up
Okay.
on the comments that the other board member made, and I think it was appropriate at this time to make.
Okay. All right, and that being the case, I'm going to open it for public comment, and we will start with the folks who are online. Anybody would like to say something? Questions, comments?
Yes. Good evening. My name is Deborah Playa. I live at 50 Bancroft Lane.
I have to swear you in. Can you hear me? Deborah, can you
Yes,
hear
I
me?
have some equipment problems, but I can hear you right now, yes.
All right, do you swear or affirm testimony you give will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Do you need the name spelled or address again?
I've got it.
Okay. Go ahead.
First, I want to object to the belated submission of the report that was provided by Mr. Kudazakis, if I'm saying his name right. The public has been supposed to have the opportunity to review it, and we weren't even aware that it had been submitted. So I do object to that late submission. I do want to revisit the retention pond the easement that's on Wharton Place. I did have some equipment problems when the engineer, Mr. Gravel, I think his name is, was speaking, and I did lose part of his testimony. Was there a design change with the retention pond? Are you no longer going to be using that easement for the stormwater runoff? The reason I asked that question is because last year when we met, I raised an issue which still has not been addressed by them. That issue, what I raised was, there was a resolution that was passed in 1998 by the planning board, the joint land use board. What the land use board did was, it says on page 6, all open space, including the lake, shall be owned and maintained by the homeowners association to be formed by the applicant developer. The township will only accept for dedication of the internal streets and roadways of the project. Last year, when I brought that to everybody's attention, it was in the context of the retention pond, and the developer focused only on the retention pond and made representations that there would only be a de minimis uh, amount of water that might flow into the Creekview Pond. What they overlooked and what they have not addressed, and what I want to make sure the record is clear on, is that the Creekview Pond is a retention pond that is privately owned by the Creekview Homeowners Association. If they are going to discharge even a de minimis amount of water onto private property, they need an easement. They don't have an easement from the homeowners association. They've had over a year to approach the homeowners association, and they have not done so. So as of today, if there's any intent upon discharging any water into the Creekview property, into the Creekview Pond, it is illegal. It's a trespass. It's the creation of a nuisance. It's private property. They need an easement, and they don't have one. The second thing that I want to bring up is that everybody has talked about their engineering report for the new developers retention pond. We know that Creekview has an engineer's report for when that project was developed back in the mid-90s. What we don't have is an engineering report that discusses the quality and the quantity amount that the quality and the quantity of water that may be discharged from the new development into the Creekview Pond. And by law, they are required to have the state of New Jersey Administrative Code made it a requirement when they passed the legislation, which has been amended several times, but it was originally enacted in 1983. Any developer who builds a property, they have to have a retention pond, and it's got to be designed by an engineer, and the engineer has to have a report that talks about the quality and the quantity of water that's going to be discharged into a pond. We don't have it for the Creekview Pond. We have one that goes back to the mid-90s. That report only talks about about this development, the stormwater runoff for the 200, 400 some odd homes that are going to be discharging water into our pond. What we don't have is the 41 new homes that are going to be developed. We don't have any idea what impact that pond is going to, that stormwater runoff is going to have on our pond. We have representations, but we have no report. And the other thing that I just wanted to mention was that I don't know if Mr. Kudasakis is aware, there are wetlands on the Creekview Pond. Mrs. Seoff is my neighbor. I gave her a map and today because I'm getting over an illness and I can't be there in person. But I did give her a map in the event that she needed it or that I needed to rely on it. That map is from the mid-1990s. It's dated May 8, 1996, from when Creekview was being developed. It was called Water's Edge at the time. There is wetlands on our property. The reason I bring that up is because what I don't know, and I don't profess to be any type of an expert in endangered species, but I don't know how far a bog turtle will migrate from wetlands. So I don't know whether or not there are bog turtles, even though there's no wetlands on Mr. Diamantis' property. There are wetlands in the adjoining property, and that may be the reason why the federal government has said that there are bog turtles on Mr. Diamantis' property. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. The most important thing is there is no easement to discharge water into the Creekview Pond, and they need an easement.
Okay, thank you for your comments, and just by way of partial response, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Gravelin to make some comments to what you said. With regards to the retention bond, did you hear Mr. Gravelin's testimony earlier?
I missed part of it. My computer froze up,
Oh.
when we have bad weather, my internet connection, I lose the internet connection, and he actually had just started talking about the easement on Horton Place, and my internet went out.
Okay, so the answer to my question is a no.
Right.
Okay. Let me give you part of the answer that he just testified to, and then you can elaborate if you want. But the original retention pond was not going to absorb all of the water coming from this project. And that was the purpose of the easement and the runoff and so forth. You, Mr. Gravelin, you subsequently modified the plan, which you went into detail before, that it will completely absorb all the water, take care of the 100-year flood. If we have 9 inches of water, it's still going to absorb on the property, correct?
That is correct. It is now designed not to release any water for the 100-year storm event.
Okay. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, what I'm understanding is that the easement is only going to be used for for sewer. It's not going to be used for stormwater runoff. Is that correct?
There will be a stormwater pipe installed in the event of a catastrophic storm beyond the 100-year storm event, which we are not required to design for. However, good engineering practice dictates you always provide an emergency outlet in the event of an 11-inch storm event so that the water is controlled and will not flood immediate areas. So there will be a stormwater pipe installed, absolutely. Now, one more thing I would like to say regarding the lakes. Back in the 90s, I met with Princeton Hydro. They are the ones who actually designed all the hydraulics, all the hydrology of your ponds out there. They wanted this water to go directly in there. In his words, the more water we bring in, the better the ponds will be. We have not done that, despite his recommendation that we do so. Back then, we were going to run the pipes directly into the system, but time has gone on, that is no longer possible. But the original designer of your lakes out there recommended we do not put a basin in because the more water, the better. That was his exact words. That's all I have to say.
I don't mean any disrespect to you, but Princeton Hydro doesn't own that pond. Creekview Homeowners Association owns it, and it's private property. In the rare event that there is stormwater runoff into that pond, you need an easement.
Princeton Hydro were the consultants who performed all the hydrology analysis of the ponds before all the houses were built. They were a consultant to the Quaker Group at the time, and I believe they still are. They were probably the premier hydrology firm in the state of New Jersey.
Mr. Gravel, I've seen the discussion, Jack, and I don't disagree with you. They don't own the pond anymore, and in fact, neither does Quaker. Quaker turned the homeowners association over to Creekview.
Okay, thank you for your comments, ma'am. We'll take it all into consideration. Any other comments from anybody online? Questions, public? If not, I'll open it to public comments of the people in the meeting here. Anybody? Public comments? Yes, ma'am. You've already been sworn in and you have her name, right? Mr. Kingsbury?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So I just wanted to comment on a couple things. Mr. McKay.
Excuse me, can you bring the mic?
Sure, thanks. I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. Mr. McKay, you mentioned that this was a last-ditch effort with regard to the environmental concerns. That's not at all true. I looked into this starting December of 2019. In June of 2020, I attended an environmental commission meeting here in Hainesport and told them of the findings. And they recommended that I send this to the Joint Land Use Board and to the planner. That was done July 2nd and July 5 of 2020. Why it didn't make it to the Joint Land Use Board at that time, I don't know. I do know that in the spring of 2021, when I attended an environmental commission meeting, and our mayor, Ms. Gilmore, was there, I provided that same information to her. All of this information that you now have, that I tried to supply to you in July of 2020, did not get to you until Ms. Gilmore forwarded the email to you in, I believe it was March or April of 2021. So I was trying, but for some reason, unknown reason, it didn't get to you. It went through the Secretary, Ms. Tiber, and to Mr. Taylor, and I don't know why it didn't reach you. So this is not a last-ditch effort, respectfully. I do understand that there is township interest in having access to the via Bancroft Lane area to the proposed park along the creek. And I wonder if you've considered, as a board, purchasing the small strip of land to provide access to this off of Bancroft Lane instead of disturbing the 11-plus acres with this development that it's environmentally sensitive and has New Jersey threatened species of barred owl and federally protected bog turtle, New Jersey endangered bog turtle, and this long-eared bat and swamp pink and another plant as well. So, please consider that, and please don't provide approval for the development without seriously addressing the issues posed by these threatened and endangered species.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other public comment? If not, I'll close public comment and turn it back over to the board.
So, if I'm not mistaken, Scott, this environmental study was more or less voluntarily performed on the part of the applicant? Was this part of it? Did we make it a part of any?
There was no requirement, as we may have mentioned earlier, because they don't require any wetlands permits. They technically don't have to apply to DEP for a full threatened and endangered species review under DEP, which is my understanding. We've had to do that for a lot of county parks we've designed. We, as a courtesy, when we received the information, the email, we sent it to the applicant and said, you should be in a position to at least respond to this, because I think the board will want to have an answer to that. And then they took it upon themselves to actually have the study taken. Our ordinance doesn't require that study be done, but they took it upon themselves to do that study to be able to address that comment of Ms. Saloff, and I apologize if I'm saying that incorrectly, in the spirit of trying to resolve those outstanding issues.
I mean, I'm personally satisfied with the testimony of the expert. I mean, I don't have any experience or foreign knowledge to dispute him that, a bog turtle only lives in wetlands, and then we have other people saying that they do. I mean, I have to accept your testimony, sir, that it's valid on that issue. I really have no other choice personally with the issue. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if it's open for a motion.
Yes, it is. I'd just like to make sure whoever's making the motion specify that everything we've talked about tonight has to be approved by Mr. Miller, engineer, or Mr. Taylor, and Mr. Kingsbury on the appropriate issues that were mentioned. Mr. Kingsbury on this easement issue, if he's satisfied, that will take care of it. And likewise, Mr. Taylor and Mr. Miller.
Before the motion, Before the motion is made, I have a question for Mr. Kingsbury and maybe Mr. Miller. The First Lady that spoke online, is there any way that if for any reason these detention ponds fail, is there any way we can put in an ordinance that they have to be assessed, a payment to be paid to the homeowners association for the care of that pond?
Well, they have designed the retention basin to the limit of what they're required to do. That's all they can do. You can't make them exceed the requirements. If there's some kind of an excess spill that damages adjoining property, then the adjoining property owner can take action against them. But I don't think the board can require them to go beyond what the regulations require.
And if I'm correct, I think they already have gone above and beyond the actual stormwater management regs.
Beyond the requirements for the design of the basin. But with any basin, if there's a failure and it damages some other property, that property owner has the right to sue or assess that the detention basin owner to make good on the damages. So that'll be a legal question, and that's true with any basin.
Okay,
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a
Yes.
motion to grant final major subdivision as requested by the applicant, grant a waiver from the tree ordinance 104-114 as discussed with our planner during this hearing, subject to the representation by the applicant that they will follow all of the recommendations in the last Alimo letter, which has been discussed, as well as the last Taylor Design Group letter, March 31, 2021. As a condition, as a further condition of approval, that they will work with our planner to mitigate further the tree waiver by the use of saplings and seedlings as may be determined by our planner, especially in the area of the detention basin. As a further condition, the developer will adhere to what I'll call the Allen Woodpecker mitigation recommendations for no tree cutting during the periods that have been discussed for both ending on the extended September 10th. I don't believe I've missed anything, but if I have, other members can chime in, but that is my motion.
do we have a second?
If I can, Mr. Chairman, the only other item, we had raised that they need to provide an easement for their development sign located on the adjacent property.
Yes, that is exactly right, and I add that to my motion.
Okay. All right, have a second?
And excuse me, and I add that the design, placement and lighting on that sign will be subject to approval by Taylor Design Group, just to complete that point. Yes.
I'll second the motion. Sorry, did you want it? All right, do we have any questions on the motion and the motion only? May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Mr. Goldpfeiffer?
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mayor Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Tricoci?
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly?
I'm actually very conflicted on this motion. And not so much the way it was, the motion itself, not so much because of the environment itself, but because of the way that it was done. And I guess it's a matter of trust. Because when you look back to what they did in the 2003, when they came in with the diner, they said in that report, we're going to cut a little bit, it won't disturb anything, and they clear cut. So like I said, I'm very, very, very conflicted. Because I really do agree with moving forward. Maybe not with the number they proposed, but definitely moving forward. Because things change and that's the way, life goes on. But I am going to vote no because of the way it was done and the trust issue.
Are you voting yes or no? No. Okay. Continue with the roll call, please.
Mrs. Baggio?
Yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Costco?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
Okay. The next is, I'll call it a representation by Mr. Taylor on the Long Bridge redevelopment plan. Why don't we just wait till everybody clears out?
What's that? Everybody has to.
Yeah, that was,
Do you need the map? Do you want it?
Everybody has the maps in their copy.
You're ready for here?
I'm afraid to look.
But,
My map and my.
while we're waiting, why don't we, let's take a 10-minute break, okay?
Oh, wait, let me pause that.
I noticed how quick you all jumped.
Taking a break, everybody online.
I thought,
How many
no,
stalls
I
do
thought
I
you
have
wanted to
in the
make the
microphone?
motion. I didn't know. I was looking at.
Oh, I didn't mean to step on your
No,
toes.
second. No.
I got, but I take,
you wanted to do
I
the
take
second.
notes, guys. I didn't think I remember all that stuff.
No, Gus,
You're,
you're not an alternate tonight, you're on the board.
yeah.
2018 asked the Joint Land Use Board by resolution to undertake an investigation to determine whether 17 various parcels totaling about 42 acres met the statutory criteria under the local redevelopment and housing law to be considered either an area in need of rehabilitation or in the alternative, an area in need of redevelopment without condemnation. As the board recalls, we had a couple of hearings in 2020 where we evaluated those parcels. Those recommendations were set forth back to the governing body, who then acted and designated the parcels in accordance with those recommendations, excuse me, some as areas in need of redevelopment, including the properties that we're going to discuss this evening, and secondarily, the residential properties, if you all remember, along Hainesport Mount Laurel Road as areas in need of rehabilitation. We are here this evening to address a redevelopment plan, which is the next step in the process, for 3 of those parcels. Those are parcels A, D, and Q from that prior investigation report. Those 3 parcels total about 22.56 acres. It includes 2 lots on Hainesport Mount Laurel Road. One is a single-family residence on a large lot owned by the applicant and potential redeveloper. And the remainder of Lot A is what's known as the Longbridge Farms property. There was a brief presentation, I believe, at the Joint Land Use Board investigation hearing, and also for,
Yeah.
It ran out of battery.
so now I know I talked too long. Is that
Thank you very much.
Cut him off.
My wife's been trying to do that for years.
Apparently, that wasn't the ever-ready battery.
I know, yeah. There was a presentation that is generally reflected within the redevelopment plan. This redevelopment plan addresses the statutory criteria or the statutory requirements of the local redevelopment and housing law. Essentially, it's being done to effectuate a couple of things. One, the creation of 3 new additional single-family homes along Mount Laurel Road. The extension of a new road partially into the site that will be developed with townhouses soon.
The surveyor sticking out this line.
The architecture will be included, or that is included in the redevelopment plan, is what will be presented and proposed for the site. To the balance of the site, and I should mention that the driveway into the townhome community lines up directly opposite Easton Way, and there is no connection from that driveway to the commercial property that runs along Route 38, so there will be no Route 38 connection into Kingsport Mount Laurel Road in connection with this. That was a concern raised by the board members and also the governing body when we went through the designation process. This essentially what the redevelopment plan does, it reduces the area for the R1 residential zoning district along Kingsport Mount Laurel Road to facilitate the 3 new residential units. It then creates the LRAT, or Longbridge Redevelopment Area Townhouse Zoning District, to facilitate that, and then the balance of the property along the Route 38 frontage, which also does have a short section of frontage along Fostertown Road, will be rezoned to the Longbridge Redevelopment Area Highway Commercial Zoning District. We set forth the permitted uses, the density, and the design standards for the project overall and those 2 new zoning districts. On page 17, you can see sort of a simplified concept plan that shows the overall anticipated redevelopment. In terms of uses for the Highway Commercial Longbridge Area Redevelopment District, we're permitting all uses within the Highway Commercial, with the exception of telephone central offices, municipal facilities, and indoor recreation areas that are greater than 10,000 square feet. Also permitted would be, excuse me, health and fitness facilities, including gyms and yoga studios, microbreweries, congregate care facilities, and a stormwater management basin that would be shared between both the townhouse and the non-residential development proposed. Under accessory uses, those would be typical. We also have permitted conditional uses of fast food and also gasoline station with convenience store, with an extensive list of conditions associated with those. Any development would have to comply with all of those, or an amendment to the redevelopment plan would be required. We set forth the design standards and bulk standards for the townhouses, and we are here, and what I should have started off by saying is, this is step, I think, 9 or 10 of 11. We are here tonight just for a master plan consistency, a referral of this, which will be adopted as an ordinance by Township Committee. So we're here just for a master plan consistency if there are any issues related to the redevelopment plan that the board members feel are inconsistent with the municipal master plan. As I said, we have architecture standards. We worked extensively with the developer to try to get a really nice architectural product for those townhouses, to sort of break up the mass of those and create a nice aesthetic, as well as significant landscaping and buffer standards through the rest of the project. We do note that we believe that this advances several of the town's master plan objectives for trying to stimulate growth along the Route 38 corridor by modernizing some of those highway commercial district standards. We also believe that preserving the R1 along Hainesport Mount Laurel Road as a transition and creating new residential development in the form of townhomes provides a greater variety of housing opportunities for current and future residents of Hainesport Township. The overall economic development is consistent with many of the recommendations of plan goals and plan objectives of your master plans and your reexaminations. And we don't believe that there are any elements of the redevelopment plan that are expressly inconsistent with the master plan.
Scott, talk to me about the anticipated cost of the townhouse units, sale price, and how this townhouse unit proposal interfaces with our obligations, our Mount Laurel obligations.
So that level of what the actual sale price would be really wasn't the subject of this study. That's probably something that could be asked at the time of a site plan hearing.
You kind of back into it, though, with the Mount Laurel issue.
Well, the Mount Laurel issue is the applicant will be required to provide, and we set forth in the redevelopment plan, excuse me, that 15% of the townhouse units will be required to be affordable units. So that this won't be a 100% affordable project, but 15% set aside of inclusionary townhouses will be included in the property.
Okay. Does he still have the right to buy out of that with a contribution in lieu?
I don't believe so. That's really a matter of jurisdiction of the governing body. I know that there are issues associated with that, and fair share housing in the courts are not always in favor, and there's a balance of strategically doing that. But that's really that would be the purview of the governing body if they were looked to.
And these are proposed as fee simple townhouses?
They are.
I do know the township committee's working very hard to adhere to any perceived opportunities for affordable housing at this time, so speaking all-handed for the committee.
Yeah, this is just an observation. You'd have to get into it when you started actually doing the plans, but let's assume you have a 15% affordable housing. Back to my cost comment, it's likely going to impact the size of the townhouse that's the affordable, deeded as the affordable dwelling. And so I think some thought should be given to making sure that all of those are not put in the same block.
And we have had that conversation with the developer, and they are completely understanding that this is really meant to be truly inclusionary, where it's not going to be, oh, that's the building with all the affordable units. So they'll be integrated into the other buildings.
Right. That mistake, and I think it was a mistake personally, that mistake was made across the street, where some of those buildings have been designated affordable, and there's some issues that have been reported, at least, of maintenance because of the low mod nature of the buildings.
And that's not uncommon. So the trend really has been to try to integrate these units into the rest of the units, socially, culturally, and sort of otherwise, and then it just sort of blends in, less stigma associated with that as well.
Right. And I had another question about I know you went through it real quickly, about the laundry list of approved uses and not approved uses on the 38 corridor. I was struck by your telephone central service station. I don't think they exist anymore.
I'm not sure they do either, and that's why I said I can't in good faith leave it in there, so I got to take it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you know, they,
I did too.
but a couple of the other things, one that jumped out at me was the super Wawa reference. You didn't use the word super Wawa, but the convenience store gas station. You put that in as an approved use?
It would actually be conditionally permitted, so not permitted outright. So for a developer under section C on page 18, both of those conditionally permitted uses, fast food or gasoline service with convenience, they have to meet all of those enumerated conditions.
Okay, so as long as it's, because I know, and you know, there's the super gas station with the chicken joint. They specialize in chicken.
Yeah.
They say they
Royal
do.
Farm.
Chick-fil-A.
And then now across
The
the
one on
street.
Lumberton, they had all the problems, the one Colby's, they had all kinds of problems when they first opened up, with traffic backing up on the 40.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just really focusing on as another version.
Yeah.
And then across the street from that is going to be an actual super Wawa.
Yes.
Gas station and everything else, so, in our small little section of 38, it's, in this, I don't know whether the world needs another super Wawa.
Well, I also had a concern about that because it's literally directly across the street from Glen Mason Street. So you have a super Wawa with all their traffic and lights and everything directly across the street from a senior citizen community. It's not probably, in my opinion anyway, ideal, as is a fast food joint right across the
Yeah,
street.
I mean, I'd like, personally, I kind of like to see the list of what's in and what's out now for that section. So that you could sort of sit with the list and look at it to see whether it might be tweaked at all.
Historically, we've had a gas station on that corner.
Well,
A little gas station, but just on the corner.
We need another bank.
but we're not talking, we're not talking about a little gas
With
station.
6, 8 bays.
We're talking about 3 acres of lights.
Yeah.
It's, I think the impact of that in that particular location goes far beyond the site, because across the street you have heavy residential. Along Lumberton Road, or Fostertown Road,
Yep.
you have heavy residential, and then you've got the Chase behind that. So, those things, they glow in the dark, we glow in the night, and send a lot of light out and a lot of noise. So I don't know.
Not in towns where I work.
All right, well, that's.
So we did very, and I don't mean to sound flippant.
If you can hermetically seal one of those places, but I don't know.
But we did put lighting design standards in there, about full cutoff, about the 3,000 degree Kelvin lighting under the design standards. It was one of the other reasons that as we were going through this process with the redevelopment subcommittee, any consideration of that needed to have significantly increased buffers. And that was one of the reasons that we did expressly come up with those, that any drive-through ordering station, drive-through lane needs to be at least 200 feet from a single-family lot or zone, or even 200 feet from one of the townhouse dwellings internal to this project. A planted residential buffer of at least 100 total feet in width has to be provided. We talk about queuing bypass lane, and then also noise from HVAC, exhaust equipment needs to comply with the state noise standards, and then also that the ventilation has to be designed, excuse me, to attenuate those cooking orders. And those are over 30 years of doing this.
Downwind of a chicken joint.
It is really a concern.
Yeah, but.
I believe it could be.
Yeah.
But to the point, you look down, there's a big super Wawa that they built in Morristown there, right at the Lanola Road and that area. Those things, and the fast food, those are heavily commercial areas. But I have to agree that strip of land doesn't have the surrounding heavy commercial that kind of invites that type of business. At least that's how I feel.
And I think the way the redevelopment subcommittee looked at it is this has always been zoned as highway commercial, and it really has been envisioned. It's not really much of a surprise that even before COVID, development for retail uses has languished throughout the United States, and it has for office uses as well. So in an effort to try to stimulate potential future redevelopment here, it was determined appropriate to try to create a little bit of expansion of some of those uses to see if that might stimulate some growth in the area.
Okay, change the subject just a little bit.
Speak in the microphone.
With these dotted lines.
We can't hear you.
On the map, with the heavy dotted lines, I believe they're considered boundary line, existing boundary line. As you go into Road A, that single family on the right, it looks like the boundary line touches the house almost. How are you planning on, what's the deal
You're
with
on
that?
page 14, I think, right?
No, well, she's looking at the large overall
Oh,
map.
sorry, gotcha, okay.
Tish, if you go to page 14. So that was their engineer's depiction of the existing zoning designations. These blue, green, and magenta shaded areas are what the new zone lines and zoning designations will be. So those 4 lots across the front are all R1. The green area in the middle is the townhouse zone, and the pink up top.
And most of the townhouse section is, we're adding residential and losing highway commercial.
We are. And that was something that the redevelopment committee struggled with, but because of that large finger of wetland in the middle of the site,
Right.
it really created this long, deep wedge of highway commercial, which, as everyone knows, that is very difficult to develop. Highway commercial needs good amount of frontage, so the proportion of frontage to depth needs to be larger.
We're sharing a basin.
There was something mentioned at one point that the only access from this condominium complex will be a footpath into the commercial. Is that right?
There will be no vehicular.
No vehicular.
No vehicular.
Just a footpath.
Just a footpath, and we have put a requirement for a pedestrian footpath in there. I would suspect at the time of site plan approval, a fire review may want to have an emergency gate and an access drive between the two, but there would be no regular automobile car access between there. And those are real, and I should say, so we're here for master plan consistency tonight. Once this gets developed, every piece of this will come back before all of you for subdivision and/or site plan approval.
Can you turn to page 16, please?
I don't like the sounds of that.
No, it's an easy question.
All right.
I know you're going to show me in 2 seconds. I just can't find it. Halfway down the page, it talks about 2 open spaces. Where are they going to be on the map on page 14?
So
The road wetlands.
if you look at the road, sort of a Y-shaped road,
Yeah,
and then you can see all of the buildings. Each one of those townhouses will have its own fee simple lot. The open space lots are those clear areas that kind of wrap around the entire perimeter of the light green.
okay.
So that will be homeowners association, common area ground, maintained and managed by the HOA.
Okay, where's
Well,
Mr. Miller's water
Says
basin?
fee simple, but there'll be an HOA.
Yes.
I guess one of the questions I would have is typically in a fee simple, the homeowner is responsible for maintaining the exterior of their property. So if you need new siding, new roofing, whatever. But because these are in a building structure, it raises the potential for those over time becoming unsightly if everybody doesn't keep up with their piece of it. Why would you go fee simple rather than condominium where the association would then charge a fee to collect the money to maintain the exterior of the buildings?
I think that's a business question. I've probably seen 10,000 townhouses developed, and they've all been fee simple, and none have been condominium with common exterior facade maintenance.
Because that's the problem we're experiencing in the Glen at Masons Creek, they're all fee simple. And and the HOA does not include maintenance of any of the
Right.
exterior of the building, and they're all affordable housing.
Well, that's what I was alluding to.
Right, and whereas the single-family homeowners, we maintain our own property, but if they need a new roof or they need new building maintenance, it's on each individual homeowner.
Just like a single family.
Like
These are basically a single
but they're
family
affordable
house.
housing, so it's kind of an oxymoron because they're the least likely ones able to.
Right, but only 7 of these would be affordable housing. All of the other would be market rate units.
That's why you want to intermingle them and not separate them like the Glen. You want them maybe one in one building, another in another, rather than whole buildings.
Well, they're structurally completely different. Single-family homes have no resemblance at all to the townhouses.
No,
Yeah.
One in
But
each building
even
would
even if
satisfy.
it's simple, it still relies on, you have a common building, you want to maintain the aesthetic of a community by having common building parameters on the exterior. And if you have each individual homeowner responsible for doing that themselves, it creates an environment where you may not be able to maintain the.
Do you have-
aesthetic.
No,
Don't
so
you
what?
maintain your area now? Are all of your houses in the Glen, are you not responsible for your own house?
Yes, but that's not a problem with the single family, but it does become a problem in the townhome area.
See, I had a place in Leisure Town, I put my mom in there, and they were pretty strict on property maintenance and colors and roofs.
Did they have the same
lawn.
restrictions as
And they had,
single-family?
they had
Yeah,
teeth, they had a pretty good,
They have restrictions, you're correct, but the enforceability of those restrictions is harder.
they assessed.
Right. It's
They're
all.
not assessing. Well,
But
yeah,
it's
that's
just like,
fine.
it's just like any other community.
Yeah.
There is an HOA, there are restrictions and regulations set up, and it's really
Yeah.
up to the HOA to choose to enforce them or not.
Right.
So it becomes self-regulating. I will say that most decent developers now realize that a strong set of HOA docs ensures the aesthetics and the character of the community that has their name on it pretty well into the future. So you can't paint your facade purple. They have color palettes that are approved, and you have to basically replace it. And if you want to deviate at all, you have to go to the HOA board. So it becomes self-regulating.
And one of the pluses with your design is all the units have their own individual facades.
Right.
And there'll be nothing to distinguish the COA homes from the
Well, that, Yeah.
Everything
They're
will look
going to
the
look a
same.
little
In
bit
our
different
case,
than the
everything
ones
looks
on,
obvious.
at the Glen. They're not going to be like the ones at the
Right.
Glen where they look
Yeah.
the same
And
except
the-
for the different colored
Right.
side, you know, the,
And this is the market rate facade, so
the
when the
shutters.
site plan application comes before you, you may see that out of the 6 buildings, one may only be a 2-story or 2.5. So we've tried to create a lot of movement in the facades, so the affordable units, some may not have a garage. That's pretty common. And sometimes it's a slightly shorter. So what it ends up happening, but it makes the unit more affordable. And it actually makes the townhouse building itself look better because it's not one flat facade and not one flat roof, the way stuff in the, 60s and 70s was built.
Way ours is.
We've come a long
Right.
way in trying to make those facades look better.
Let me go back to the wetlands finger that sticks out there. Who's, under the plan, who's going to control that? Is that going to be considered open space? How can it be, who's going to control it and police it so it doesn't become a dump, for lack of a better description?
So a portion of that is included on the townhouse lot. Basically on sheet 14.
Right.
You can see where.
Became part of their open space.
That will be part of the residential open space.
Right, and then the rest of it, there's pretty dense wooded area
Yes.
in that wetland.
Around there. And then the balance of that wetland that's in the pink area is going to be on the commercial property. So it would happen the same as any other property in town that has some wetlands or transition areas along the rear of that. When they come in for site plan approval, what we've done in some communities is, if you have a real concern, we see it less in a townhouse community or in a place where there's an HOA. People know that it's actually, their property line ends 31 feet from the back of their deck. They can't go to the area behind it. Sometimes when single families back up to wetlands, people build a little shed, they dump their leaf clippings, those things start to grow. We find that where there's HOAs, it usually becomes a lot more self-regulating. And then the town doesn't have to get involved.
Are kids building tree houses? Lakeside,
Kids build-
Creekside? But
Pass.
the HOA regulated it. Yeah.
I would say.
It happens.
Is
That's
there,
gonna happen here, right?
is
Yeah.
there a thought to having the wetlands become a green strip area that could be utilized by the public as a park almost? Whether one could control it that way. If the town would accept it, maybe have the developer deed it to the town. Paul's probably shrinking it right now. But you got it.
I would say-
Wetlands,
This is a
though.
creative
Unusable.
idea.
No, it is, and in concept, it makes sense. And I think it works well as a nice, small neighborhood, natural area for the residents who live here. Because having that lawn area that's right near the wooded area, if you live in a townhouse, that's a great spot to go out, have a picnic, throw a Frisbee, do some stuff in that lawn area right near the woods. That's part of your common homeowner's open space. The problem with opening that up to the public is, A, it backs up and is contiguous with a lot of single-family homes and also the homes in this community. So trying to manage and maintain that from a municipal standpoint would be really problematic, just trying to get access to maintain that because it's so isolated.
Right.
And now,
Right, I was going to say that, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say that Medford, it's not an isolated parcel, but Medford has done something similar with the farmland. Just when you come out of Old Medford and heading out of town into Medford Lakes, that parcel going to Medford Lakes on
The
the,
walkway in the pavilion?
on the, it's at the left, I guess.
Brannan, yes,
Brannan,
at Cow
yeah,
Point,
The Brannan Cow Farm, or whatever it was, Cow Point,
right.
yeah. I mean, they've done something like that with that.
They have, and the good thing with that is, that walking trail is really visible, and it's kind of it's easy to police and easy to maintain.
Yeah, I
And
understand.
but I
it's
agree.
different, but,
It-
but they took that and made it something better than just a wood surrounded by
Right,
buildings, which is what this is, unless you could make it better.
right.
Yeah. We have a problem and an advantage at the same time. I think right now we have 4 guys in Public Works
Yeah.
and, no police department. I mean, in all due, and I lived in Medford for a while. Medford, Evesham, they're allowed to do things that we just can't really do here.
Yeah, I mean, look, this
They
is,
just don't work.
this is conceptual, so
Yeah.
I'm throwing out a
They
concept.
don't work. They don't work because
Just-
we just don't have the resources
Yeah.
to.
And a funny story about the Cow Point Park, I think Beth said that it took 20 years to get approval for that walking trail. 20 years.
Yeah, Pinelands was requiring archaeological
Yeah.
studies. That was also part of sort of a multi-parcel land swap
Yeah.
that also preserved some of the land directly across the street, which is now a cornfield as well.
Yeah, well, the chances there was an Indian camp in that little wetlands
Yeah.
area is probably pretty remote, but
Mr. Taylor,
it's archaeological.
2 questions. Page 17, the shared basin,
Yes.
who will maintain that? Because it's shared, I'm assuming it's between commercial and residential.
Yeah, so the anticipation, and this will be vetted out during site plan approval, there will need to be agreements in place between the commercial developer and the residential developer and HOA for ongoing maintenance and those responsibilities. Normally, I think what would happen is based on the pro rata share of the amount of the volume or runoff going into that basin, whether it's 70/30 or 80/20.
So each condo owner will have to, their homeowners association will have to.
The HOA will have a,
All right, and I have one other question. Page 20. See, I just want you to know I read this thing.
so I was joking when I said 45 minutes. I was done at 12.
I know. We're trying to stretch it. Up at the top of page 20, D, it says a minimum of 20% shall be for affordable. I think you said 15%.
So I did, and that was a spectacular catch of a typo.
Yeah.
I caught that today on a Zoom with Paula and John Gillespie. So that on the second hearing
Yeah,
will be changed because back on page 27, bottom of second paragraph of page 27 is where the correct number of 15% is inserted.
yeah, okay, I was going to go there next, but I got you, okay. So 15 is the number.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay, these are the design standards in the town. Is this
By the way, you did a great job putting this booklet together.
Except for that one typo.
Well,
You put a mean report together, pal. Very nice.
Thank you, appreciate
And
it.
John,
Best we've ever seen.
and John said it was de minimis, it's not.
So we need a motion
The
tonight?
report or the error?
Mr. Chairman?
The error.
yeah, we're saying that this complies with the township planning.
Sorry.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Sorry, who? Thank you.
I think that went very quick over there.
Oh, second.
Okay, Gus second.
Oh,
Okay, Gus is seconding it. Any questions on the motion? Mr. Kingsbury, you're good with the motion? We're blessing it, it complies with the,
The motion is that it's consistent with the master plan.
correct. Okay, any questions on the motion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mayor Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Tricoci?
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly?
And this is
Mrs. Faggio?
yes.
Mrs. Costo?
Yes.
doesn't show the
Mr.
wetlands.
Woodpecker?
Yes. Okay, next order of business, the minutes. I didn't miss them this time.
I second.
Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Kelly? Mrs. Baggio?
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mayor Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Jacochi?
Yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Cosko?
Yes.
Mr. Colbaker?
Yes. Okay, resolutions. First resolution we have is Queen of Peace, 2021-11.
May I make a motion that we accept resolution 2021-11?
I'll second that.
Okay, any questions on the motion?
Excuse me, Mr.
I have
Bradley
one.
can't- Mr. Bradley can't motion.
I'll second.
Okay. All right, I have a question on this motion, and I'm a little concerned about it because I'm going to be asked to sign this motion at the end of the meeting. And I believe something is missing. And I just want to get some clarification so we all know what we're talking about here. If you look on the minutes, on page 14 of the minutes that we just were talking about, down at the bottom, it says, I stated I visited the site. It's clear there's no left turns coming out of the Marne Highway. I suggested a sign be placed at the Lumberton roadside that there is no left turn. We had a lengthy discussion about that. That's on Marne Highway though.
What page is that?
Yeah, and then Mr. McKay made a motion, you approved with all the conditions stated, and we all said, yeah. But in the resolution that I'm looking at, it doesn't have that specifically. So I'm yielding to Mr. Kingsbury or somebody else, help me out here.
What?
There's a provision that
Right
there'd be
there.
no left turn, but it says at Marne Highway. I think maybe the Marne Highway is a mistake.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at,
Yeah, it should say Lumberton.
because it's already there on the Marne Highway.
That's a mistake. It should be
It should be.
Lumberton Road exit.
All right, well, I'm not bringing it up to embarrass or bust chops, I just want to get it right.
Good catch.
I'm
All
not
right.
easily embarrassed.
Pardon?
I said I'm not easily embarrassed.
Okay, so if I could
It's a lot
ask
more than that, right?
Mrs. Kelly and Mrs. Baggio, you seconded it, right?
Yeah.
Will your motion accept that we're making a change in that resolution to Lumberton?
Yes, with subject to
Okay.
that change.
All right, any other questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Jacochi?
Yes.
Ms. Cosko?
Yes.
And Mr. Colbaker?
Yes. Next resolution is 2021-12, Frank Palente. Need a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion. Second.
Okay, any questions on the motion?
Is that Mr. McKay that seconded
Mm-hmm.
Roll call, please.
that? Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mayor Gilmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Jacochi?
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio?
Yes.
Ms. Cosko?
Yes.
And Mr. Colbaker?
Yes. Correspondence, we've got 6 items of correspondence, I believe it is.
I make a
Yep.
motion that we file correspondence.
Second.
Okay, any questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mayor Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Jacochi?
Yes.
Mrs. Baggio?
Yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Cosko?
Yes.
And Mr. Colbaker?
Yes. Professional comments.
Happy Independence Day.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
No comments.
Okay,
Board question to Paula Tiber. What does business look like for first meeting or the August meeting for my personal planning purposes?
We have another redevelopment, and we have,
The Philadelphia group.
yeah,
that
the
was supposed to-
Philadelphia group, they're the C boxes, and
All right, so we have a good agenda.
Possibly. It's either August or September.
I think it's 3 items.
It's either August or September. But definitely a redevelopment,
yeah, we got another redevelopment.
All right.
investigation.
Okay, any other board comments?
He can go on. You wanna-
Yes, I don't know whether I should, whether this comes before us or whether it comes before the township committee, but Mr.
Could you use the mic so, because we can't hear you back this, I can't.
Mr. Kingsbury, I have a question about making a resolution that so we won't have all this problem with these environmental reports. That if we have a developer come in with over 5 houses, that they are required to do an environmental report. They can always ask for relief, but if that's in a resolution that we put forth, then we will know exactly, what we're looking for.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Can we have a resolution that basically says we have to have an environmental report, like we need a traffic report, like we need whatever other thing?
It can be part of an ordinance requirement.
Okay. Well, an ordinance,
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah, I would never use correct.
So if it's an ordinance requirement, it would have to be adopted as such by the governing body.
Okay. Then I'll bring it up there. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe it's already in there. Which is why phase one of certain projects had to provide them, and then they requested a partial waiver of AEIS for this project, and asked if they could rely on from when they built the diner. So we do have an ordinance requirement.
Any other board comments? Public comments? Mr. Baggio, do you have anything to? Okay, public comments. Any public people over there? Thanks. Close public comments. Adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Boy, you guys,
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Okay, thank you.
For the record.
Hey, Paula, what's the state guidance going to be, or is presently on when remote
We can end
access?
it now,
You can end it now?
if you wanted to.
You can't hear.
You have to have a motion?
Make a motion to end it now.
I mean, we've talked about it. Most of the municipalities in Burlington County were not hybrid like us. They were fully remote
There's
full
no
time.
prohibition.
And they are
Can't
ending
hear
it
the
and
application.
going back to
Vote
in-person.
on it here.
Most of the towns in Burlington County.
Bruce,
I had this
can I get a
conversation
ride
about
home with
West
you?
Beach.
Oh,
Scott,
okay.
actually, yesterday.
Either that or I gotta
Mayor
call my
Gilmore.
wife.
What we should do.
So you'll make a decision.
I
Thank
think the requirement to do it can be lifted, but maybe for transparency's sake, to continue to allow it.
Now, Paula Tyra,
At least
I'm
on
not
our-
signing that
from our
resolution. We'll have
committee.
No,
to,
he'll send me a corrected one.
well,
Wait, is it on the different page?
yeah, I could sign it and then you
All
just
right, well-
replace it.
That's one page.
It's a consideration.
Is that good?
We also have to take into consideration with the land use board about in-person testimony, that they should be visual. What do you mean? There was some talk regarding whether that's legit or not, that somebody's sworn in and they can't listen to these.
What if you can verify,
I mean, no, I get that.
has there been any legal?
You have to do a Zoom.
Yeah, you have to have like face to face.
Well, that's what we have.
Thank you.
Yes.
Answering my
Yeah, it was one of the seminars I was in, they were talking about, that it really should be
Well, you can always keep it open, but make a new set of directives
Yeah.
that specify that if you want to testify,
You got that.
then you have to physically be present.
Happy birthday, by the way.
But, we're thinking is, why exclude people from at least participating in the meeting from home? But you can always require active participation to be in person.
Yeah.
For the land use board, I don't know,
Yeah.
for testimony,
Yeah,
but I don't
for
know,
testimony.
yeah.
That's
And
the-
maybe there'll be litigation, maybe litigation will come out.
Well, asking a question, but not being
But,
sworn.
right. That's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose
Yeah.
for transparency, leave the line open for
Yeah.
people to listen and ask questions.
Sure.
But
Yeah,
then you
there are
gotta,